Good morning, everybody. I want to, before we get going for the topic of the day, address a couple of other matters if I could. I'd like to briefly address the senseless and apparently gang-related shooting early yesterday morning here in the capital city. I am pleased that the innocent residents who were caught in the crossfire continue to improve. In particular, there's a 13-year-old boy, so keep them all in your prayers. We should all keep praying for their full recoveries, and we will ensure those responsible for this lawlessness are brought to justice. Tammy and I came to Trenton to be with and to pray with this community yesterday, to meet and thank the extraordinary medical team at the hospital, including, by the way, a U.S. Army major trauma surgeon who trains, sadly, because of the frequency of gun-related and other violent crimes. Here, he happened to be on duty, and that was a game changer. We met with law enforcement, state, local, county, federal, with County Executive Brian Hughes, Prosecutor Angelo Onofre, Mayor Eric Jackson, and Mayor-elect Reed Gusciora, among others. First, I want to commend the actions of law enforcement, starting with the members of the Trenton Police Department who showed great professionalism and courage in confronting the individuals carrying out this senseless shooting. Without their quick action, this could have been even worse, could have been a lot worse and even more deadly. These officers are heroes and deserve our thanks. I actually had the opportunity to look physically at the scene, and it's extraordinary. And again, I think it's in many respects thanks to their efforts that the casualties were not higher. While the headlines have shocked all of New Jersey, gang violence is an all too stark reality on too many streets in this city. And I'm not going to turn my back on Trenton. I'm committed to working with the mayor and the mayor-elect, the council, with community, faith, and county leaders, and with my partners in the legislature to turn this city around and ensure a safe and growing place for families to live in peace. I'm further committed to working with state, county, and local law enforcement to get guns off our streets. We need to know how these people obtained their weapons, especially the deceased gunman who was a well-known gang member with a violent past. I will continue to advocate for tightening our laws and focusing our efforts on closing the iron pipeline that brings guns into New Jersey from elsewhere. This is a wonderful, and I'm here almost every day of my life, so I know enough to be dangerous. This is a wonderful and resilient community that needs champions. The organizers of Art All Night are champions for Trenton. We need that event and events like that to bring this community together. The thousands of peaceful festival goers are champions. The community leaders working hard to bring peace to the streets are champions. And I will be a champion for Trenton as well. There is so much promise here that we must realize, from educational opportunities to growing the economy. And this is how we can most effectively combat the gang scourge, by giving young people opportunity. I'm happy to take questions when we do questions on that, but I think I just want to warn you in advance, I'm probably going to refer all of the questions to the Mercer County prosecutor. But again, please feel free to ask. I want to also briefly address the Star-Ledger story concerning our oldest son, Josh. All of us who enter politics must accept some level of public scrutiny. That is fair. I did not have any misconceptions about that myself, nor did my wife, Tammy, about either scrutiny of me or of her. But I think parents can agree that every child, even those of public officials, and particularly in this case a minor, should have the right to learn and grow without being harassed by reporters. Sadly, the Star-Ledger's editors have turned my son's youth into clickbait, and that is quite simply a disgrace. Tammy and I entered public life to improve the lives of New Jersey's kids. That shouldn't cost the privacy of our own children. And here is the message sent by the Star-Ledger to everyone in public office and those thinking of entering public service. Everything about you is fair game, including your children. Medical records should be kept private, and the medical records of children should be sacrosanct. During the course of their reporting, the Star-Ledger's reporter obtained and divulged to others my son's private medical records. It is absolutely alarming that the medical records of a private citizen, a minor no less, could be handled in such a cavalier manner. The only thing my son did was to have parents in public life. The Star-Ledger is now saying that for this sole reason, he doesn't deserve the same privacy rights as other young people. Before we go on to the budget, I want to say a couple of things. I'm incredibly, and Tammy joins me, we're incredibly gratified by a bipartisan outpouring of support for him and for us and condemnation of the article. And my plea and my hope and my prayer is that as his life goes on, that this has not so infected his relations with others who were cold called, for instance, friends who had liked him on Facebook, and that he gets to get back into the full swing of life. He's a special dude, imperfect for sure, but special. I was asked about him sometime in the past couple of years, and I said, he drives me crazy, but I can't imagine life without him. God bless him. Now on to the discussion of the day. There are 12 days left to enact a responsible budget to move New Jersey forward. I remain committed to using every available minute to sit down with Senate President Sweeney, Speaker Coughlin, and their teams to hammer this out. The people of New Jersey do not want a shutdown. I do not want a shutdown, and I'm prepared to do everything in my power to avert a shutdown. But more importantly, and what I have insisted upon throughout this process, is an honest budget that puts New Jersey on a responsible course to a stronger and fairer future through sound and sustainable fiscal practices. And I know that is what the people want as well. Should the legislature send me a budget proposal that looks anything like these charts, I will veto it. Only I have the authority to certify revenues. From day one, we have been careful and circumspect in our accounting. We are ending the practice perfected under Governor Christie of making numbers fit some personal narrative. I will not sign any budget based on numbers that I do not believe are sound and sustainable. And as we have reviewed the legislature's proposals, and by the way, this has been given to us verbally, I do not believe theirs are. I'm not going to certify a budget based on gimmicks. I know what will happen if I do. We've seen this before. We'll just find ourselves right back here next June, if not sooner. When you build a financial house of cards year after year and see it fall year after year, at some point you have to realize that the same old way of doing business in Trenton isn't working. We need a responsible budget based on real, sustainable revenue that makes an historic investment in the middle class, particularly a middle class that's been ravaged and left behind over the past 8 years. Let's be very clear about what the legislature is proposing. They are proposing almost $1 billion in unsustainable revenues, either in one shots or two shots. They're proposing $450 million in new spending beyond my initial budget. They are including savings and efficiencies that are largely not real, at least achievable in this coming year's budget. Under their proposal, we would close the next fiscal year with a $164 million plus deficit. I have been very clear that we must make sound and sustainable budget decisions in order to invest in New Jersey's future. The millionaire's tax is sound and it is sustainable. Closing corporate loopholes is sound and sustainable. Resetting and undoing the gimmick of the sales tax cut is sound and sustainable. Reducing one-shots, as they are in our budget, to a 15-year low is sound and sustainable. A healthy closing balance is sound and sustainable. We all share the same core budget priorities, a state that looks out for those who need a hand up, that grows and secures the middle class, that meets the needs of students and communities, and that invests in mass transit and infrastructure to create jobs, attract new businesses, and make us competitive. These are not matters for debate, but we cannot fund our priorities without sound and sustainable revenues, period. That includes school funding. Until we have an agreement on sound and sustainable revenues, we cannot have an agreement on school funding. As I've said before, the people of New Jersey did not send us here to keep practicing Chris Christie's broken politics. The past 8 years hollowed out our middle class and led to 11 straight credit rating downgrades. No more. We were sent here, all of us, not just me, not just Sheila, the whole team that got elected last year. We were sent here to fix Trenton and to stop the games. No made-up revenues, no short-term gimmicks and one-offs, no promises made this year that can't be kept next year or the year after. This is my goal, and if it takes my vetoing a budget for us to reach that goal, I am prepared to do so. With that, we'll take any questions you have.
Governor,
Michael?
on Friday, Senate President Sweeney and colleagues laid out a long list of legislative priorities they wanted to put back in the budget, almost all for the needy and disadvantaged in one way or another. Is their absence from the budget deliberate on your part or inadvertent? Are these things you could get, they sound like things you endorse?
Yep. I think neither.
Were they inadvertently left out?
No, I think neither inadvertent nor deliberate. By the way, I saw that list from that press conference for the first time. And clearly, one of you in the press corps asked, basically, you got to be kidding. You're telling me Murphy wouldn't sign up for this? Of course we would. There's a legislative add-back process that goes through the budget process every year. I suspect a number of those things are a part of that. Would we entertain funding those programs? I can't say all of them, but the ones at least that I can recall, yeah, they're consistent with who we think we are as well. But again, I can't stress enough, we've been given a verbal summary of a proposed budget, which, by the way, has not been introduced. At least I don't think so at 11:15 on Monday morning. This is what we produced. This is what we gave in the middle of March. And it was 90 days until we had a verbal conversation that listed some of the items which I'm now comfortable enough to put up here in the vein of one-shots. I think we've been quite clear about what the elements of our budget are. I think our treasurer has testified 4 times. I believe each of our cabinet members have testified twice. We have been nothing but transparent. So the answer is if we need to find the revenues. It's like school funding. To say you have a deal, school funding, by the way, is the allocation of revenues to fund schools. If there's no revenue agreement, we may have a conceptual understanding. That's not an agreement. Likewise, if we can find the money to fund those programs, count me all in, please.
Yes, thanks, Governor. I want to add some precision to your veto warning to the legislature. You have a tool to use a line item veto or an outright veto. Are you saying that you wouldn't accept some new spending if it's tied to sustainable revenue, or would you just dismiss the entire budget they send you on the grounds that it's all unsustainable?
We will consider use of all of our options. Please.
The legislature has disputed the variable deficit in the budget that they're considering. Can you explain how you arrived at that?
Yeah. Which chart is it? So can you see this one? I'm having a little bit of a Vanna White moment here, I recognize, for those of you old enough to remember Vanna. By our math, it's a $164 million deficit. Our budget, I believe, to the penny was a $751 million surplus. And so that is a combination of a significant amount more of increased spending, revenues that I can't certify, some of which are here. Audits. I feel like I'm back in the campaign last year. I recall having this conversation where we were proposing the very budget that we've submitted 3 months ago, talking about sustainable revenues, getting the state and the middle class back on its feet, and my opponent was talking about audits. And I think I said at the time, count me all in for audits. and there's a bunch of money associated with audits here, but you can't, I can't certify that. An audit that is yet to be done. I mean, we all generally look at a lot of the healthcare expense audits. We stood up a healthcare savings commission a couple of weeks ago, so we're like-minded about that, but I can't put that in the bank. Putting aside what you think of tax amnesty, that's who knows? You just don't know. And by the way, it rewards the folks who didn't return their library books on time. And so that gives me mixed emotions. I'm not saying you would never do it, but, and so we could probably go through the math with you, but it's a very explicit, and there's no question in terms of what I can or cannot certify that that's the deficit you come up to. David?
Governor, we keep hearing about all these meetings that you guys are having, and then we keep hearing about how they broke down, people were yelling, or doors were slamming, whether or not that's hyperbole or exaggeration. What happens when it breaks down? What is it that the talks break down over?
So it depends. And by the way, we had 2 meetings on Friday. And it worked between the 2 meetings, all parties, and I think in good faith. There was nobody yelled at anybody. We just have a fundamental breakdown in how we see the health of this state, in particular its middle class. And so one of the things that was a fair request by the legislative leadership is, okay, let's assume you guys get generally what you want for this coming fiscal year. Where's it going after that? And that's a fair question. You're just going to have a 1-year hurrah and then be pulling our hair out a year from now. That's the exact opposite of what we want, by the way. And we think, by the way, a lot of this gets us right to there. So we went away with our team and said, listen, let's do a real honest engine look at what this looks like in the next fiscal year. That was, I won't get into the details, but that was a good discussion to have. They came back with a couple of what I would say very minor, but in the spirit of goodwill, items to discuss. And then, again, this is in the absence of a budget. So this is what we've put forward in all the hearings and all the testimony and all the speeches. And we've had a verbal sense as of a week ago today, generally. And, I'm asked, are you still committed to the millionaire's tax, the sales tax, closing the loopholes as a sustainable revenue matter? And have you gotten off of that? And the answer is no, particularly in the absence of a good alternative. So there's no hysterics, but we don't see this the same way. Please.
Are you going to name the legislators that are standing with you against the version of the budget that Senator Steen and Mr. are trying to put through right now?
Listen, first of all, we're all Democrats, and at the end of the day, let's hope, and I believe we'll get to a good place. Opposing or enemies are not words I would use at all. In my discussions with legislators, not in leadership, I assume you mean, is my number one job is to make sure they understand with crystal clear precision where I stand. I've not made any calls or sent any messages out, basically trying to twist somebody's arm. I just want to say, listen, as you go into this, and this not just today, but today is a good example of many of these, I want to make sure you know exactly where I am. Please.
In regards to the shooting, you said you want to start targeting gangs here in Trenton. Any idea? I know it's still very early.
Yeah.
What might be done.
Too early to tell, to be honest with you, and I'm not the most qualified person to answer that, but it's pretty clear there was, and again, I got to defer to the Mercer County prosecutor on this, but it's pretty clear there was some local tension, and folks ended up at Art all night, and there were a lot of innocent people around there. I know we got to continue to tighten our gun reality. I know that particularly, I mentioned the iron pipeline. We're still near 80% of the guns that are committed, guns and gun crimes committed in New Jersey are from out of state. But I would defer, I want to work with Eric in his last days and Reed as he comes into office, the local law enforcement, the county prosecutor and his team to give you a crisper example. I did say one thing though, which is an important point I want to reiterate. The more positive pathways we can create by getting education to the very best place it can be, by getting jobs, real job creation in and around Trenton, the more, hey, wait a minute, I could see myself doing that moments, the better we'll be able to fight that scourge. Please.
Have you
as I say, I don't want it. Let there be no doubt about it. But I'm not going to sacrifice what I believe are the principles of this state and its middle class in particular going forward. I just a budget for the sake of a budget to kick the can to July 1st will not have my name on it. Please, Michael. Sorry, Tom.
On the budget, we get to July 1st and there's not an agreement yet. You know yet what a shutdown looks like, with parks closed right away?
I'd rather not speculate. I'd rather focus right now on what we can do collectively to avoid that happening. Tom.
Legislative views are talked about the public's attitude toward tax hike. You say there's tremendous fatigue about it. I would like to know what your attitude is, what your read on the public sentiment is about tax hike. And ask you again, because this comes up too in conversation.
Please.
Would you be willing to promise no tax hike next year if you get a good budget this year?
Yeah, on the second question, Tom, I would say conceptually that would be an objective. But I can't, no one would sign on to that definitively. Because I don't know what the global economy, God knows what tariff news are happening literally as I'm standing here. I can't predict the world, so I would never sign on to that. But conceptually, I view this as a reset budget. You know, we're digging out of 8 years of a mess. Let's reset the clock, particularly for the middle class. This is my sense on taxation. First of all, who wants to pay more taxes? Raise your hand. That's what I thought nobody ever does. The taxation that is choking people is property taxes. And we have a number of initiatives early on underway to try to chip away at that and crack the back of that. No one magic bullet. Exactly no one celebrated the reduction of the sales tax, and exactly no one has complained to me about the prospect of it resetting to 7%. And if you look at public polling, and we don't govern by polling, but if you look at public polling on the millionaire's tax, it has a significant majority support. So I think our job ought to be put those in place, sales, millionaires, close loopholes on corporations and hedge funds, close the out-of-network loophole, which we're thankfully legislated and on our way to doing. Get smart. Count me in to get smart on where we can save money. I'm all in for that, and we have some programs underway, but then really bear down and focus in on the property tax conundrum. Please.
Governor, you mentioned earlier at the end of the day we're all Democrats.
Yes.
But there are lots of folks who say, hey, a room full of Democrats are still so far apart you can't figure it
Yep.
out. Can you speak to that?
I was the national finance chair for this party, so I lived the big tent in my own personal life, and you may be living a little bit of that experience as we look at what's going on here in New Jersey and in Trenton. You know, we really are, and I think this is a badge of honor for our party, we take all comers. And we should feel really good about that. But when you're a party that takes all comers, you got to prepare yourself for not always seeing things the same way. Mrs. Murphy. How are you? Hold on, Michael, before I go, I want to make sure no one who hasn't asked yet, I will come back to you. Please, Ryan.
So, what have you offered as concessions that they rejected?
So listen, there's one party that's presented a full budget. There's one party here, and it's me. So this is what I've offered, and I stand by it. Please. Sorry.
In arguing for the corporate business tax surcharge, Sweeney said that the large corporations of New Jersey got a $2.9 billion windfall in the Trump tax cut, and that's where the money is, and they can afford to give up a little bit of that windfall, and that's less harmful to the state than hiking the income tax on $1 million income. What's your view on that?
This is a good example, David, of what's the tone of the discussion. We've had this discussion in graphic detail, Steve and I, face-to-face on more than one occasion, and we just don't see this the same way. It's not like we're throwing food at each other. So I'll just express my concern with this. Number one, and most importantly, it's temporary. That's the most important concern. So when you buy a house, there's a reason you get a 30-year mortgage and not a 90-day revolving loan from your bank. We're building a house here. You know, you're making multiple year ramp-ups in public education, in universal pre-K, in access to higher education, in infrastructure and transit. Temporary answers. I'm not saying you would turn your back on money that landed in your lap, let's be smart about that. But actively, volitionally putting in place a revenue source that goes away in 2 years does not make any sense to me. Steve is largely right. Corporations are doing just fine under the Trump administration. By the way, so are millionaires, and they did really well as well under Governor Christie. I worry about our competitiveness. So we're already at 9% CBT. New York is at 6.25. If we went to 12, which was the proposal, even temporarily, would be at the edge of the American reality. And another concern is it cuts down far too into the sort of small to medium-sized business community. I think it's down to $1 million in earnings as far as I can recall. Another concern, and this one is more conceptual, I was speaking to somebody who runs a big corporation in New Jersey. By the way, in fairness to his point, headquartered outside of New Jersey, right? But they've got over 2,000 employees in New Jersey. So putting aside there's an overwhelming support for the millionaire's tax, a millionaire who decides to leave, and by the way, the biggest reason they were leaving was our estate tax, which folks might note we have not gone near on doing that. I want to make sure everyone knows that for the record. Anecdotally and otherwise, that's the one that really gets people at the end of their working life. And by the way, that was also infecting down into small business owners, folks that you would not associate with being in the estate tax league. But a millionaire decides to leave New Jersey, and I hope they don't, because we're going to convince them that we're putting a lot of that money, plowing it back into the state, and that will make them more prosperous and stronger. That sounds like the Mexican national team fight song there, David. I just want to, you're rubbing this in. When that company, if that company I'm talking about, over 2,000 people leaves, not one of them is a millionaire. So that's 2,000 middle class, upper middle class homes that go empty, or jobs that are not filled, restaurants that not get traversed to. It has the potential, in my humble opinion, is much bigger. The scale is much bigger and much more significant. I'm conscious of the time here, maybe. You've already got one. I was going to say, real quick, I'm going to do these rapid fire. Can you be quick and I'll be quick? No. Sorry.
Realistically, what's the path forward to compromising? Is there anything in the big pitch that you could stomach?
Yeah, as I say, not all of this is, oh my God, but you can't, I can't certify it. I can't certify it. That's the problem. As long as I'm not compromising the principles of what I believe is a strong middle class in New Jersey, I understand I'm in politics. Compromise as a general matter is not, I'm not opposed to that, but it can't be to compromise the very core of our future. Tom.
They're hoping to get a budget by Thursday. I'm curious if you have to go through a line item or wholly veto, is an individual, are you going to make it clear what you're going to do ahead of Thursday so legislators will know, hey, if I side with Murphy on this, or I'm sorry, if I side with legislative leadership, I'm going to lose funding from my hospital or my school. Are they going to know specifically what's coming down the pipe?
Have not got there yet. So the answer is to be determined. David.
Governor, on the shooting in Trenton.
Yes.
You can talk about maybe the festival is now dead.
Oh, I hope not. I tell you, we were, Tammy and I were at the Galilee Baptist Church yesterday, and one of either the councilwoman or the councilman-elect made the point, we need something like that now more than ever. So let's hope that it doesn't die, that we breathe new life into it, and please God that everyone who goes to it is safe. Real quick.
Yeah, just want to put a finer point on the answer to Brian.
This is the second time you said that, by the way.
Are you saying you're not willing to move off that budget proposal from March, or that this just doesn't give you enough to move off?
It's a premature, so this certainly doesn't give me enough because there's no budget. There's one budget out there right now. So let's see whether or not another one materializes this week, please. I forgot it, by the way, forgive me. No, that's not the way I'm thinking about it. Right now, I'm going on the record, whether it's in a public forum like this or in private exchanges. I'm saying very simply, I want to make sure you know with great precision where I am. Please.
You said there was someone at the hospital from the military that helped you.
Yes.
Can you elaborate more?
Yes. I'm probably not qualified to give you the exact answer, and Capital Health can give you this. But apparently, and I did not know this, Capital Health at least has an arrangement with the U.S. Army, in this case a major trauma surgeon, and they actually train their surgeons in that hospital because, sadly, because of the frequency of the wounds that they see that are similar to what they might see in a battlefield. We all agreed with great violent agreement, no pun intended, that we'd like to see Capital Health go out of that line of business sooner than later.
I see two audits on here.
Yeah, so do I.
Medicare and state health plans, and I'm wondering why is an audit, wouldn't its savings be, sustainable in coming years if it's real?
It could be, but these haven't taken place. So I'm not suggesting there isn't money here, but I can't, when I certify the revenues, I can't speculate it. It's also June 18, and I believe, and again, I haven't seen the budget, their budget, but I believe these are implied to be savings that would last for the entire fiscal year, when in fact, some of these plans are not up for reassessment or renewal until maybe January 1. Michael?
Where it says state house debt on the bottom, is that about the renovation?
I believe it is, yes.
Is this a game of chicken, Governor?
No, it's a game, listen, others could speak for themselves. This is no game. This is, I got elected with a clear mandate to stop the games, and that's why I'm here. I'm going to go. Thank you all so much.